What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. And of course, as usual, got a great number of topics to talk about. Have a lot of friends. Let's start that over. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleash, the weekly panel discussion show. And of course, we have a great number of topics, some discussion to have for everyone here. So remember, before we jump into this, like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. So let's go ahead and introduce these two gentlemen. You know them very well. If you've tuned into this channel for a split second of time, you've seen them. The jack of all trades that has mastered them all. He is the senior editor of SureDog.com. My man, Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on?
I'm doing real well. I have just recovered from the 43 straight hours of sleep it took me to recover from UFC Vegas 20, and I am bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and ready to talk about the fights.
You sound very enthusiastic. So let's go ahead and introduce the man with the stats, the facts, the figures, and the numbers who anchors this panel every single week. He is the associate editor of SureDog.com. My friend, Jay Petr. Jay, what's going on?
You know, I love you guys, but I don't know if I'm as excited about talking about what happened this past weekend as y'all are. But I will say there was there was a bit of oddity going on about how plodding and not quite a death trudge, but it was a slow event. I'll put it nicely. And that brought out a very interesting stat, which is my stat of the week. So UFC Fight Night 186, UFC Vegas 20, whatever else the Twitter kids are calling it these days, had every single fight reach the third round or beyond, which is the first time in UFC history, that's like 500 and change events, that this has ever happened where every single fight on the card has passed the 10-minute mark. So you got your money's worth of fight content, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, sounds like it. So it looks like I picked a great weekend to essentially disconnect from the fight world. I took the family for a brief getaway. So we were out of town for a couple of days, and I was almost completely unplugged. I checked Twitter a little bit here and there, but I certainly did not watch any of the fights live. I caught up on a few important things earlier today. And according to, our conversation that we had before we started recording, and from what I saw, the brief moments I did look at the timeline, man, my timing was impeccable. So with that being said, UFC Fight Night 186, aka UFC Vegas 20, has this been the worst UFC card you've watched ever?
Go ahead, Duffy.
It's up there. I don't keep a bottom 5 list of the worst cards I've ever seen. I tend to just forget them, but I did kind of just go scrolling back to see when was the last time I could think of a card that was even in the same neighborhood as bad as this. And I got as far back as last May, the Woodley versus Burns card. Like the main card of that one, Woodley versus Burns, Augusta Sakai versus Blagoy Ivanov, Quarantillo versus Carlisle, Roosevelt Roberts, Brock Weaver, Mackenzie Dern, Hannah Cyphers, and Caitlin Chikagian versus Antonina Shevchenko. Like there were a couple of just kind of really boring, not, very predictable decisions. The finish, like Dern over Cyphers, was just the most obvious thing in the world. And then Burns versus Woodley, it was an eye-opener at the time because of how it played out. But without the surprise factor, there's no rewatch value there. Like, I never need to rewatch that. That's about it. Beyond that, I could probably go years since I can remember UFC card with as few good fights, well, obviously as few finishes, and the stakes being so relatively low.
That's a very, very important point that you bring up there, Duffy, that the stakes of this event, I mean, they were supposed to be high. GANE versus Rozenstruik was to be a number 3 contender eliminator fight. I guess you could call it that. Maybe number 4. Wait, hold on. We got Stipe Ngannou, so Ngannou is number 1 contender. John Jones was the number 2 contender, which is already in the books. Derek Lewis maybe number 3. Okay, so it's a number 4 contender fight was the biggest fight. And there was a rematch between 2 top 10 bantamweights and a match between 2 top 15 light heavyweights. So stakes weren't very high, but this is a fight night card, so we have to temper our expectations. But I think the fact that it was so low stakes made it tougher to watch than, say, a UFC 208, which is just universally renowned as terrible, which is, if you remember correctly, was in the Barclays in Brooklyn. Durandamy Holm, which was an atrocious, not a great fight, and a bad decision, and a poorly officiated decision. So it had all the facets of being a tough main event. The co-main event, Anderson Silva, Derek Brunson, we sure love that fight, guys. The only finish on that card was Jacare Souza versus Tim Boesch. Okay, he hit a Kimura, but here's the other stat of the week that doesn't apply to anything besides this event. Tim Boesch has suffered more Kimura losses in the UFC than any other fighter. So the most predictable possible outcome was submission mastermind hits a Kimura on the guy who always gets Kimura. So UFC 208 was a really rough one. But it at least had a title fight for what I believe was the inaugural women's featherweight title. So at least it mattered to a degree, even though what happened afterwards was a tragedy. How Durandamy gave her belt up because she didn't want to fight a contender. And then you have to start looking back further to the really gnarly ones, like UFC 169, Faber versus Barao, which had the most decisions in UFC history. Just a slog of an event, some competitive fights, and the best win of the night was Abel Trujillo, which in hindsight is not a nice person, so we're not very happy about that performance. This was just a very difficult card to enjoy, and this being UFC Fight Night 186, it hurt to watch because it wasn't. Not only were they all decisions, not all decisions are created equal, but most of them weren't terribly compelling. And that made it a tough sit through when the fight of the night is so obvious. Well, there's nothing else that even could come close to it. And there was only one stoppage. And the UFC was so bored by this event, they only gave out three post-fight bonuses. The last time that happened, spoiler alert, UFC 208. When they just said, no, we're not giving out the extra $50K. This card, and I'm jealous that you were able to not watch this event. And I say that with all respect to the 18 fighters that competed. I wouldn't, wish any bad upon you all, but at least it's over.
So I guess I can't be any more thankful that I was not tuning in live, but my frame of reference for bad UFC events, I've got two overall low marks. I'd say UFC 119 ranks as probably my all-time least favorite card. Perhaps it was because the stakes felt higher. And that card originally was supposed to have Brock Lesnar versus Cain Velasquez, and injuries and whatnot end up decimating the card. And we got Frenchman versus Crow Cop in the main event. That on paper sounds fantastic. At the time that was booked, that sounded like a ridiculous style matchup between two of the more notable action fighters in the UFC's heavyweight division. Man, it turned out to be the exact opposite of that. And that entire card had matchups that promised on paper to be electrifying, but ended up falling short. Chris Lido versus Matt Serra sounds like a heavy, just gunslinging fight. Kind of a middling affair from what I can recall. Melvin Gillard and Jeremy Stevens just screams violence. Not quite very entertaining. And the most notable thing that happened on that card, aside from the last second knockout that Mir did with the knee to secure the win over Crow Cop, was like Sean McCorkle armbarring Mark Hunt, and I believe Mark Hunt's UFC debut. So that was the most notable thing on that card, other than the knockout, which, by the way, that knockout, the only knockout on the card, was not awarded a post-fight bonus as well. So a consistent line here, and I have a feeling we'll be talking about the post-fight bonuses in a little while. But before we do that, let's also acknowledge that when we talk about worst fight night cards, I have a hard time distinguishing fight night card from fight night card, because we have this endless conveyor belt of fights. But it's a very, very difficult thing to make it worse than the Fox Sports 1 era. To have the worst pacing known to man and just be watching this endless just parade of fighters who you haven't heard of going out there and having these long 3-rounders well into the wee hours of the morning. And I'm living in Los Angeles talking about, man, this card is going on too long and it is too late. I'm in Los Angeles and it's like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, and some of this is still going on. So it's very difficult to cross that benchmark, and by all accounts we did cross that benchmark. So I pray for everyone who endured that. But let's go ahead and show some love to the main event. CIRYL GANE, he defeats Jairzinho Rozenstruik via unanimous decision. Dana White not exactly too fond of GANE's win, but do we now have to put some respect on his name here? I mean, this guy is on quite the win streak, has a nice resume in his brief time with the promotion. How many more wins does he need before we start taking him seriously as a legit heavyweight title contender?
It's only because of the now surprisingly crowded picture at the top of the division that this wasn't for a title shot. Like, Francis Ngannou did not accomplish particularly much more than CIRYL GANE has before he was up there. It just happened to be the shelf was a lot more bare 2 or 3 years ago. It's fortunate that GANE has come along at the time he has, that they almost forced, the UFC is almost forced to give him some more time to develop. He needs another fight against probably another, top 15 or top 10 guy. I'm impressed with GANE. Obviously, one of the big narratives, or the big counter narrative, after everybody being like, oh, that was a boring fight, that was a terrible fight, the counter narrative has been, can you believe he's doing all this after only being in the sport for 3 years? Like, not being in the UFC for 3 years, but training MMA for 3 years. Just 3 years since he walked in off the street, said, I want to learn to kickbox. The coach said, hell no, you're learning MMA. Like, 3 years. I can think of just a handful of prospects who came to the sport without already a high level pedigree in something else and advanced like as quickly as he has. Because it's not just that he's an insane athlete. He has a well-rounded skill set. He has poise. A lot of fighters that come to the UFC 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, having knocked everybody dead, it's not just that they panic the first time they're in trouble. They panic the first time they don't finish the fight in 3 minutes. He doesn't panic. He fights with a certain poise that it belies his age as well as his age in the fight game. I still think GANE is the real deal, and I don't think GANE is particularly to blame for the miserable fight on Saturday night. Yeah, it was a lot of staring contest, but pretty much every exchange, GANE was the one who went first. He was the one who, moved into range, threw his jab, nothing was coming back, he moves back. If CIRYL GANE can beat you with nothing but a jab, that's a you problem. Like, this is Rozenstruik's loss. He fought like Yoel Romero did against Israel Adesanya. He stood there waiting for a counter, but without feinting or moving, you're just watching the paint dry. And that's what it felt like Rozenstruik did for 5 rounds. I'm still on board with GANE. And for the record, I'm still on board with Rozenstruik. He's going to get a step down from this. And he's probably going to knock somebody out really quick.
I'm reticent to be quite as gung-ho about the future of GANE, and that isn't to question his skill set or the fact that I had thought that Jairzinho Rozenstruik was going to knock his block off. None of that is what came to me that I watched 25 minutes of CIRYL GANE fight that I thought this guy will be the champion using this skill set to win the fight, because I see everybody ahead of him would not let this game plan happen. There's no fighter on the list that would just stand still and have their controller be disconnected as if we were Frank Mir fighting Andrei Arlovski and just kind of stand there and breathe heavy. This was an anomaly of an anomaly. I mean, if anything, I take much more away from this fight that Jairzinho Rozenstruik can freeze, and he can freeze for long periods of time and hope to kind of catch something. If we remember correctly, I think he lost at least 3 rounds, if not 4, against Alistair Overeem, and then clocked him with 4 seconds to go to get the questionable stoppage win. This is a guy who froze when Francis Ngannou run at him. Like, the second Ngannou closed the distance and just threw something, and Rozenstruik stood there, got hit, and then Ngannou tried to Donkey Kong him into the pavement. Now, I mean, obviously this was a coming out party because CIRYL GANE just finished or just decisively beat a top 5 guy. But I would proffer that not all top 5 wins are created equal. And I feel he needs at least 2 more for seasoning. Could you imagine using that style to try and fight Stipe Miocic, to try and fight Ngannou, who is not going to stand there, to try and fight Alexander Volkov, who can out-jab him better, stronger, hit harder? I just see there's too many obstacles with what we have now with CIRYL GANE, that he is a 3-year-old MMA fighter. I want to see him fight Greg Hardy. If you want to do that, new development, better at a new skill set, just learning how to do this, I want to see him fight somebody that like that. Not that I actually legitimately want to see that fight. My point is, I need to see more from CIRYL GANE because I'm not convinced in the slightest. And he fought a smart fight. He won the fight. He won all 5 rounds. Like, there was never a point that he was really in question. Rozenstruik threw just over 100 strikes in 25 minutes. Through. Not landed.
There was that many.
Not landed. Just it let go with anything for the clickers to count 100. Like, I think it was like 110, 111 strikes in 25-minute span. And GANE, he doubled that up, but still, it was a good enough win because Rozenstruik's a top 5 guy, but I need to see more because I look at him fight Derek Lewis and I laugh. Because Derek Lewis would just knock his face to the moon if GANE tries to back up straight up like he did when Rozenstruik was not countering him. That was kind of something a little surprising, that when GANE would weave in and out and jab and step away, it was a linear kind of thing. Just things like that you kind of go, well, I can see he's inexperienced and he's going to grow and he's going to get better, but he really needs to, because his next fight is going to be a grinder. And I hope he fights Volkov. I personally think that's the fight that they should make to see which one can move up to the next level, because otherwise it's just a crazy logjam. I don't know. And do you disagree? Do you think that Volkov, or do you think that GANE should fight a guy like Volkov? Should he fight lower? Should he fight higher? What do you think?
I mean, the problem is, like, for his development, you'd like him to fight someone lower than Volkov. Volkov is an extremely experienced kickboxer who has a hefty amount of MMA bouts under his belt now. And he's been in there with some serious opposition, the likes of which GANE has not faced. I mean, he does have JDS on his resume, but that's the ghost of JDS, we probably should say. GANE has had I don't think GANE has even been in the cage for 20 rounds. Like, he spent so little time in mixed martial arts. This is probably the best case scenario for him to get a win over a name like Rozenstruik. Even if this is a bizarre performance by Jairzinho, he got a win over him. So he doesn't halt his undefeated momentum. He got rounds in. And that logjam that we talked about before, now he's not forced into the title picture the way Ngannou was. And even with Dana getting mad about the performance, that might be good too, because if he did knock Jairzinho's block off, and then they're propelling him to fight the winner of Stipe and Ngannou next, or wherever he factors in with Derek Lewis and potentially John Jones, that could be bad news for his development. But the problem is, he did beat Jairzinho Rozenstruik. So you can't really treat him with kid gloves at this point. I would like to see him take a step back, and not necessarily a huge step back. Against like a Tom Aspinall or something like that would make a lot of sense to me. If you want to give him another aging vet, I mean, yeah, you could throw in a Ben Rothwell or something like that. There are other names that you can throw in there, but he does not need to be pushed to the front of the line. by any stretch of the imagination. So yeah, maybe it's better he just flies under the radar for a little bit. Give him 2 more fights to varying levels of opposition, and then we can start having some serious discussions about his growth and development as a potential title contender.
And you are accurate, by the way. And I think he's fought about 18 rounds in his career so far after 8 fights. The UFC almost did him a disservice, did CIRYL GANE a disservice by making him fight Rozenstruik, and not because it didn't think he could handle him or whatever happened. But again, he just got a top 5 win. So they can't have him slip in to fight Marcin Tybura. You know, they can't have him fight Rafael Pessoa. You know, they can't. They really pigeonholed this guy, and he's 30, which is fantastic for the heavyweight division to have young talent. I seem to remember some wise person talking about the beautiful skill of the top tier of the heavyweight division over some other categories. That argument took a big hit because now 2 top 5 guys put on that performance. I will admit that, whereas 2 lesser ranked bantamweights put on an actual show. So I'll give you that. Yeah, man, CIRYL GANE's in a real pickle here because he beat a top 5 guy. You give him Walt Harris on a losing streak, you give him Shamil Abdurakhimov, it just doesn't. They're stuck. I think that at this rate, he's going to fight Curtis Blades next, and then buckle up, Buckaroo. So I don't know.
Yeah, that all of those sound interesting, and you just can see them going a variety of different ways. You know, as long as we don't see GANE versus Derek Lewis next, or you know, GANE versus Stipe or Ngannou next, like that we don't need that right now. All right, fellas, so let's move things along here. We're gonna go to our swing or miss portion of the show. After beating Nikita Krylov, does Magomed Ankalaev deserve a top 5 opponent?
You know, it's funny. If this were a couple of years before, he would have already gotten a title shot, not anything else. You think of the guys, basically every year, the past several years, there's been a light heavyweight who has come out of nowhere, rattled off 3 good wins and gotten a title shot. Anthony Smith, Volkan Ozdemir, Kira Prochazka's on the radar. You know, Thiago Santos moved up from middleweight, clocked a couple guys, boom, he's in a title shot. I mean, this is a guy in Magomed Ankalaev who lost about 10 seconds of a fight. He lost 10 seconds of a fight. He got submitted. He got a little foolhardy and fell into a triangle choke. But Ankalaev is on a 6-fight win streak now. And yes, you can argue his level of competition hasn't been the highest. I mean, Ion Cutelaba is maybe he was top 15, and then the second fight he wasn't because he got knocked out of it. But the point is, he's only fought a couple of top 15 guys, and those are like in the 10 to 15 range. But I feel like there's no other avenue at this point, because otherwise he's going to fight fighters mostly on losing streaks or barely getting back on track again, like an aforementioned Anthony Smith, who finally got back in the win column by beating Devin Clark. Do you really want to see Anthony Smith fight a guy with bricks for fists in the Magomed Ankalaev? I don't know. I saw Sherdog Features editor Brian Knapp write in his matches to make column, he should fight the winner of Thiago Santos and Alexander Rakic, which I get it. I'm not upset about it, but it just feels like such a chasm of opponent from Nikita Krylov, who, by the way, is a top 10 guy right now in the UFC, to Thiago Santos after winning a fight against Rakic. So, yes, I do, but I want to see him against a top 5 guy. But here's the problem. Who do you put him against? Glover Teixeira, Thiago Santos, Dom Reyes, Alexander Rakic, Yuri Prochazka? Those aren't guys that I think he should fight now. And they're busy. They're doing things. They're having fun. Jan Blachowicz, the champion, has his hands full. Glover Teixeira is waiting in the wings. He shouldn't have to fight way down in the rankings. So, okay. I'm going to, in theory, swing on this one. But I'm going to miss in actuality because I don't think that there's a dance partner that he should reasonably face right now in the top 5.
I'm fine with that. I don't know about top 5, but certainly he needs to step up from what he's getting. The thing about Nikita Krylov is Nikita Krylov on his best night is definitely a top 10 quality light heavyweight. Like you look at his best wins and his worst losses in the UFC. His best wins position him as a top 10 fighter, probably, and then some. And I felt as though what I was seeing in the cage on Saturday was peak Nikita Krylov. You know, he fought to his best advantage. He actually won the first round. He didn't commit any ridiculous brain farts. He didn't gas out to the point that it affected the outcome of the fight. I feel as though Ankalaev beat the best version of Nikita Krylov, a guy who on talent might have been, you know, the 8th or 9th best light heavyweight in the world on that night. I don't think he should have to take a step back from that. Like Jay pointed out, this is a division that, especially in the past 5 or 6 years, it's been easy for new guys to come in and get right into the title picture just because the division had been aging out and John Jones had beaten everybody. So it's almost a miracle that Ankalaev has managed to string together 6 wins in a row without getting into the title picture. It helps. Paradoxically, it helps that he lost his UFC debut. Paradoxically, it helps that Iwan Kudalaba is an idiot and he had to run that one back. Like these bumps in the road have actually been to his benefit because he might have gotten a title shot prematurely if he had just flattened Paul Craig as he was 10 seconds away from doing and then won his next 3. But at this point, it's time to see something. They can't give him another guy ranked around where he is. Jay just named a bunch of fighters ranked above him and why it wouldn't work. I did see the Thiago Santos winner. Like, I also like him. I also like the idea of Ankalaev welcoming Volkan Oezdemir back to action. Oezdemir was supposed to fight Santos, I think.
Yeah. Oezdemir was supposed to fight Krylov, actually.
Sorry, yeah, that's the one.
So that's my pick because, like, you know, now he kind of just takes Krylov's place in that spot. So, and
Oezdemir, he's lost a couple, but he's not lost any like bad ones. If
just the Prochaska one,
yeah, like if Ankalaev can style on Volkan Oezdemir, okay, he is a top 5 guy. I don't know if he deserves it, but we deserve to see it. Like Ankalaev can't be in a holding pattern any longer.
Agreed with that. It's just such as much as we think of the light heavyweight division having this sort of resurgence, we're getting an illustration of how thin it really is. Like it's still a very, very thin division, even if it's more crowded than it was just a couple of years ago. Still not a whole lot to work with, and Volkan Oezdemir seems like the best logical step up, a guy who we know is capable of making it to the title fight. However, I don't think many people predict that he'll be back there anytime soon. You know, he's had a few bumps on the road, but he's still a dangerous guy. That sounds like a good place to figure out what to do with Ankalaev next, especially when just about everyone else is either skill-wise just seems like on another stratosphere or they're just busy. And I think that makes a lot more sense there. I mean, it's a big problem. Yeah, go ahead.
The only name I just thought of, and it depends on how he recovers, because I know I think he hurt his pectoral or something in his chest. If Johnny Walker could come back this summer.
Yeah.
Ankalaev, Johnny Walker. The top 10 fight, both guys trying to get that one win to move up.
Yeah, I'm not mad at that either. Those make some form of sense. If I'm not mistaken, Krylov defeated Walker in his last one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's see that's now I know I'm playing MMA math, and that's something we like to avoid. But that just seems a little weird if he gets to fight the guy he just beat. You know,
I can dig it.
Doesn't match. It doesn't match to me, but still an exciting matchup, and rankings wise makes a lot of sense. All right, fellas. So now let's move things on just a bit here. Pedro Munhoz and Jimmie Rivera definitely decided to put on a fantastic display of bantamweight action. Bantamweight being the superior division. Would you make that a 5-round fight if you had to do a trilogy for them?
If I had to do a trilogy, yes. I would not be in a huge rush to do a trilogy. Like, it was a really good fight, but on, you know, a fight night card that didn't completely suck. It wasn't even an absolute gimme for fight of the night. It was a good fight. It stood out by being the only good fight that night. Now you have a trilogy fight in your back pocket. But the thing is, neither of these guys was right on the doorstep of a title shot anyway. They each had a couple of losses recently. There's no reason to make them fight each other again right away. Just let them go their separate ways and see who rises and who falls. And if you're in a position to make this fight again in a year or two, great. But I would make it 5 rounds if I could. I'd have it headlined like a fight night.
I'm glad you said that, because I saw that there was a lot of chatter and MMA media discussion, not just the MMA Twitter, that were like, let's do it again. Let's do it in 6 months. Let's make them rematch 5 rounds. Why? Why do you burn a trilogy for nothing, for no stake other than a good headliner? It will be a great headliner. I would have loved to see if Jimmie Rivera could keep going on that busted wheel for 2 more rounds. I would love to see. There's a lot of things that could have gone into it. But they fought 5 years ago. They fought now. By the time they could fight again, Pedro Munhoz will be 39, so I don't know if I'd like that if they do the 5-year thing. But it doesn't get him anywhere. Like, if this were for a number 1 contender. I think right now, right at the discussion where we are right now, I think Pedro Munhoz and Jimmie Rivera are ranked 8 and 9 by the UFC, give or take the same for us. With Pedro Munhoz having that recent loss, if we want to go that way, to Frankie Edgar, he's not jumping him in the rankings. So Pedro Munhoz is still the number 8 guy. Why make him fight number 9 again? Why not make him fight the winner of Dominic Cruz versus Casey Kenny? Why not see what Cody Garbrandt's up to? I forget what his dance card is. I don't think that Pedro Munhoz fought Marlon Moraes, so there are options. And it's a good division. It's not as good as some other divisions, but it's a real good division. Mark Raimondi, actually, at ESPN, recently wrote that bantamweight's the deepest division, and I bit through my tongue, but I appreciated it nonetheless. It's a strong division. There's lots of other matchups. Why burn trilogies so fast? Because then what do you do? The only way a trilogy should go beyond is if it's been a long time since then, since they fought 3 times and go on. Like, you want a fight number 4, make Alexis Davis fight Sarah Kaufman again. Bring Sarah Kaufman back to the UFC. Do that 4th fight. All of their fights were good. So why not make a 4th one? But Rivera and Munhoz pushing the trilogy and then they're stuck after it. I think you're wasting something good.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree there. Like, I don't understand what it is about MMA just pushing toward trilogies just so fast and just burning up rematches left and right. This was a good fight, but do we need to see it a 3rd time? Even just and not just based on the rankings, because it literally no movement. I don't expect the UFC rankings to change at all due to this fight. 8 beat number 9, and that's fine. We can leave it there. And I would be very surprised if the Sherdog rankings changed at all when that vote is tallied up. But man, like, just based on the action in the fight, like, do we need to see that again? It was fun, but looked to me like Munhoz was clearly winning. And had this been a 5-rounder, Rivera most likely would have lost his ability to walk within the first 30 to 45 seconds of the 4th round, and then it would have turned into a bloodbath. Like that's probably the most likely scenario. Of course, Rivera could have landed, a huge right hook or something and change everything. Yes, that's always a possibility in mixed martial arts, but the smart money says that leg was falling apart and was going to be pretty much useless with a few more well-placed kicks. I don't need to see that again. And quite frankly, bantamweight is too stacked of a division with too many exciting names and too many wonderful matchups that we haven't seen yet to force that one upon us again. Jose Aldo's not busy either. Him versus Pedro Munhoz sounds like a great time to me. So there are a lot of different options, and I just don't get why everyone needs to walk down these familiar roads over and over and over again. Let it go. If we don't get a trilogy between these two, I will be perfectly fine. We've seen enough. But a great fight. But I'll say this: great fight relative to the card that we watched. And I think that has a lot to do with the sentiment as well. I can't speak to the live watching experience, but we've all watched a card that dragged on, and then there was a glimmer of hope, and it was the best thing in the world.
That's a really, really good point, because I saw there was not an isolated call for fight of the year contender. I didn't feel it. It was a really good fight. It was entertaining. It was back and forth, but it didn't have any of those feels for, man, this is one of those fights. Like when we saw Joanna fight Weili Zhang, where you're like, something different's happening here. I didn't have that feeling. But relative to how horrible that card was, it was like eating cardboard for a month, and then you finally get a candy bar and you go, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever eaten.
Yeah. It's like you get, a Big Mac after eating gruel, and now a Big Mac is gourmet. No, it's not. It's not. It's better than gruel. And that's we keep falling, and that's a part of the sport's overall recency bias. Like, oh man, I can't remember a day when the fights were actually good because the last 4 were complete ass. So this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, and a whole lot of that going on in mixed martial arts, and I don't expect it to end. I'm sure we'll have a very similar discussion to this within the next few weeks. All right, so let's move on to one of the larger issues that has been presented to us due to UFC Vegas 20. As we mentioned before, bonuses were quite different. So normally the UFC awards $200,000 worth of bonuses on fight nights and pay-per-views. This time they only offered up 150,000, so they left 50 grand on the table. I mean, should the UFC have just given this extra 50K somewhere else on the card, gentlemen?
Nope. I don't think that they should have. It's not owed. It's not guaranteed. Yes, it's customary and expected, but that's part of the problem. The whole bonus system is broken, and it's broken very much in the UFC's favor because it comes off as largesse. It comes off as something, like extra. It comes off as, well, a bonus, but it's not something that's expected. And I understand their reasoning behind it, or at least their stated reasoning. Keep the dogs hungry and they'll fight harder, which is a horrible, that's a horrible metaphor to use for the humans that work for you. But that's not what you get. You get people fighting the same way they normally do and just making really embarrassing, like, begs for money immediately afterwards. I would be fine with the bonus system being done away entirely. What I want, as a fan, first of all, is I want fighters to be paid more guaranteed, or at least guaranteed to show, not just be put on salary necessarily, but I want fighters to be able to quit their day jobs and start training full time earlier in their careers. I want there to be enough money in the sport that more fighters decide to switch to MMA out of college instead of, spending the next 4 years trying to get into the Olympics, or like that. That's what I want. And bonuses in no way help make that happen, because even you think of the biggest bonus magnet fighters in history, and even those guys don't usually get them in more than half their fights. It's very rare. It's very rare that you get a Chris Lytle who got an award of some kind in 10 of his last 12 fights. Normally, even for your so-called guaranteed action fighters, it's at best half the time. And for a lot of very good fighters, it's almost never. And because it's a bonus based, on each card, a lot of it depends not only on your performance, but kind of how the rest of the card went, just as we saw this past weekend. People were talking about Munhoz versus Rivera as a potential fight of the year candidate. But if you took that fight and plunked it onto this coming weekend's pay-per-view, just took the whole fight exactly as it played out, there's no guarantee it's even on the leaderboard for fight of the night. So just a lot of it, it's capricious. It's beyond the fighter's control in a lot of cases. And yeah, it looks good for the UFC, but it does very little to actually promote the overall quality of the product.
Definitely good points there. I just wanted to highlight Justin Gaethje kind of being the exception to a lot of these rules. I mean, this is a guy who has won a bonus in all but one of his fights. I believe that the Khabib loss, there was no he didn't win a bonus for that, but he won double bonuses in a couple other fights and stuff. But you're talking about $50,000. Think about the punishment that someone has to endure to win the fight of the night in particular. Those are normally the slugfest. Those are normally the ones where someone wakes up and you don't recognize them the next day. And they're doing this for $50,000. Now, I think that when the UFC when you're already grossly underpaying your athletes, that $50,000 is absolutely nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. Just go right ahead and give it to somebody, because it stops people like us from talking about how crappy you pay the fighters. I think that's an important thing to remember here. If all the bonuses were awarded, we'd be more focused on how crap the card was and how, like, man, this guy lucked out on 50 grand, and we'll move on to the next topic. Not this overall discussion about how shitty the bonus system is. The idea that you already dedicate so much of your life to this, and then you're giving pennies for that, and then we'll give you a few more pennies if you go ahead and waste every brain cell you thought you had. It's really not that good for the sport, and I think it's something that's holding the sport back. We also have to talk about the show win structure for pay. If you want to talk about something that's going to make for altered performances and whatnot, show win is going to be your main culprit there, where a bonus might take a classic knucklehead like a Donald Cerrone and decide, hey, I want this 50 grand because I want to buy like 3 new parachutes or whatever. I'm going to just head kick to oblivion, and it's going to be the most exciting thing you've ever seen in your life. The show win structure will tell someone like, hey, man, I'm going to grab this guy's leg and I'm going to hump it for the better part of these last 5 rounds, because, man, I don't know, those previous 2 rounds were close, and I want double my paycheck. This is just a symptom of the overall pay structure of the UFC being completely flawed. Which actually, now I just thought of a new piece for I'm not surprised, but we'll move on. If I can do the research in time, then I can have all my facts right. But yeah, I think the bonus system should be altered. But I'll tell you this: if they're going to stay with that same bonus system, wouldn't it be cool to have a year-end bonus as well?
I mean, there are so many options, and the ones that are presented are just so flawed to the degree that it's difficult to fathom. Because this point I'm about to make is not an anecdotal one. This isn't something I made up. The higher you are on a fight card, the closer you are towards the main event, the greater the statistical likelihood is that you're going to win a bonus. Translation: the higher you are on the card, the more bonuses you get. That's just simple fact, since the UFC put bonuses out there since UFC 67 or something like that. So if you're in the main event fighters are just way more statistically prone to getting them. Now, is this a symptom of the fighters being on the main stage and they want to show off? There's a lot of ways that you could break into it, but just from a simple how it exists standpoint, the higher card fighters will get bonuses more often. Now, this is a problem. This is a paradox, if you will, because the higher card fighters are getting paid more money. So they're already Donald Cerrone is a perfect example. Donald Cerrone is a guy who you're never going to see if you don't see him on the prelims, it's for a reason. Like when he fought Alexander Hernandez on this card in the ESPN, the first ESPN card, and he headlined that, and he got a bonus for kicking Alex Hernandez in the head. This is a guy who makes $150 to bills in any given fight. Does he need that extra 50 grand? Where it actually makes a difference is on the undercard fighters who make 10-10. They make 12-12. They make a piddling amount of money for what they're getting into. I mean, these contender series contracts, if their fighter does a great job and sparks their opponent, they may make like 16-16. So that means $16,000 to show, 16,000 to win, which therefore the win is a bonus. But that shouldn't be a bonus, because that means if it, the way it exists now, and we all know this, is the UFC is holding a fishing pole with a carrot at the end, and they're trying to have the fighters reach out and get it, but only half of them can get it. So the UFC is just able to get away with paying fighters less, because they can say, well, if you had won your fight, you would have made more money. That's nonsense. That shouldn't be how it is. And you'll notice that most of the top fighters in the company don't have that provision. Champions, basically none of them have show and win. The best negotiated fighters, I don't know if this is a management team thing or whatever it is, just have show money. Boom. That's it. I'm fighting this weekend. I'm making $250 or whatever it may be. And that's just how it is. If I win, great. I may get bonus money, but it's not contingent on my performance. And I think this is a major issue, because if you get rid of the win bonus, and you are so right, it makes my nose want to bleed. You get rid of the win bonus, you're not going to have nearly as many, well, I have to win, I'll do it at any means necessary, even if it is boring, horrible grind of a fight. Who knows what CIRYL Gane would have done if he didn't have to fight for a win bonus? It's the mind boggles at all the options that could have been if the UFC decided to pay the fighters the way they should. And here's the thing, and this is my last point. There's money in this business. There's money to pay these fighters. The UFC, and this is on the book somewhere, pays its fighters, what is it, 16% of its revenue, something along those lines, whereas every other major sport, it's about 50%. So the money's there. The UFC doesn't have to abide by that, because obviously there's no fighters union or any kind of thing like that. But not even go down that road, that rabbit hole. If the UFC just paid the fighters more, wow, that'd be it. That'd be so easy. It'd be so easy, and the product would increase to a level that would compensate. And it just, there's so many things. I feel like we did a disservice by not bringing Trent Ryan-Smith on the show to discuss this with us, because this is a topic that I know he professes as well. I mean, what is the old expression? The UFC will step over $1 to pick up a penny. It's just, it defies description sometimes. And when the UFC does this little thing, like skimping on a post-fight bonus to try and send a message to the fighters, like Dave Feldman saying he's going to take away half of the BKFC fighter salary for a boring fight, obviously just more of a message sent than anything, it draws the scrutiny that the UFC could have gotten by on the status quo. That we wouldn't have thought about it. You're right. You guys are right. We wouldn't have even discussed it on the show. But because they did open the can of worms, and now we're not the only show talking about it. And although we're just MMA media, we don't have much to do about it. It's a legitimate debate that needs to be had, I think, on the higher level.
Big time. I mean, and just to, before we wrap this topic up, just to give a little bit of illustration here, just bringing home all the points that we all brought to this discussion here. Ben, when you mentioned earlier about just wanting fighters to not have to work day jobs, like they can just train and they become the best martial artists they can, and we're talking about how lower card fighters need more bonuses and whatnot. Last year's talk of the town, Joaquin Buckley, who had that amazing, jump spin kick knockout. Now, looking at his payouts. So when he won that fight against Kasagane, he was guaranteed $10,000 to show with a $10,000 win bonus. So the $50,000 performance bonus that he won afterward more than doubled what he made after he won. So it was quintuple what his guaranteed pay was. That's a big deal. But the sad part about it is, after doing that, the next Monday, he was back as a shift leader at Walgreens. The guy who did a spin kick so impressive that the president decided to call Dana White to talk about it, and that Kanye West made one of the trashiest songs you ever heard in your life. And and this was the viral talk of the world, and this man was managing Walgreens a couple of days later. You tell me the pay structure is not broken. So,
And 10 years from now, he could be back managing a Walgreens, and that will still be on UFC highlight reels.
Very, very true. Very, very true on that point. And while we're talking about fighter pay, I'll just go ahead and jump on this grenade first. For the best titled segment in all of media history, I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons. This is where we share something that surprised us or ironically did not over the last week. So my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons comes courtesy of the UFC and Monster Energy. They signed a 3-year deal, a 3-year extension on their deal, which now includes international sponsorship as well. So the president, I think it's also now they're like the official water supplier of the UFC. I don't know what brand of water Monster Energy makes. I have no idea.
I think.
What's it called?
Brondo, I think.
Brondo. That sounds like pimp juice.
It's the fake sports drink from Idiocracy.
It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of Booty Sweat from Tropic Thunder.
From Tropic Thunder, yeah. It's good.
But yeah, man, like so the president, and I'm gonna screw up the pronunciation of this gentleman's name, but I'll give it a try anyway. Hans Molenkep, who is the director of Monster Energy. I guess that's his title. That's weird title for a company. But anyway, he's some guys high up at Monster Energy. He describes this deal as, quote, multi-million-dollar deal. How much of that is going to the fighters? I'm not surprised. Ben, what's your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, I am generally the person least likely to mention MMA boxing crossover, whether it be conventional boxing or bare knuckle. But given that way back in 2003 or so, when I started watching the sport seriously, Frank Mir was my first ever favorite fighter. I couldn't help but notice that last week he announced that he would be boxing at the upcoming Triller Fight Club card on April 17th, and that he would be facing former champion Antonio Tarver. Now, this is problematic on several levels. Tarver is 52. He hasn't boxed since about 2016. He hasn't been a top boxer since losing his last couple of titles in like 2008. So he is, several phases past anything that could be remotely described as his competitive prime. And then there is Mir himself. And I don't know what it is, but it always seems that there's a certain type of MMA fighter who gets pulled towards boxing in the twilight or even in the aftermath of their career. And it's not the converted boxer. It's the guy who started out as a grappler, became a good boxer, and racked up double-digit knockout losses. It was Antonio Silva. It is now Frank Mir. I understand that this matchup is not set in stone or in ink yet because they're having some trouble getting it sanctioned by the Georgia State Athletic Commission, which I'm not surprised at that. I am surprised that this particular matchup is even being spoken about. And again, I'm always reluctant to say a fighter should retire for their own good. I'm always reluctant to say a fighter shouldn't, try to seek to make their money. Like they don't owe me anything. They owe themselves and their families the best life and living they can give them. But at the point he is in his physical and competitive career, speaking of Mir, and then whatever kind of shape Antonio Tarver is in right now, it becomes an equation of more than just money as to whether this is a good decision for you and your family. But yeah, I'm both surprised and not surprised, and I frankly hope it doesn't happen.
Well said, Ben. Jay, what's your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
Well, thankfully, I have a story about an aging fighter who's been around a long time, but he might actually be making a good decision for his long-term health. I mean, it depends, because we might actually be talking about maybe he should be retiring instead of changing up what he's doing. Jeremy Stephens, who I believe currently is the number 4 most active fighter in UFC history with 33 fights, is moving back up to his home division of lightweight, where he fought up until, I believe, 2012, I believe, is when he dropped down to featherweight. So Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens is moving back up to 155 pounds, hoping to try and jumpstart his career. This is a guy who had his last win against Josh Emmett, a very impressive win with the elbows, and then went on to fight Jose Aldo, get folded by Jose Aldo, get boxed up by Magomed Sharipov, have the eye poke and then the rematch with Yair Rodriguez, and then have Calvin Kattar do the elbow thing on him. So this is a guy who has gone through a real rough patch and is looking to make a change. So I am actually surprised that a guy like him has decided, maybe I'll stop cutting so much weight. Maybe it'll be better for my brain, because you think of fighters, you think of so many of them going, even though I was just knocked out so badly that I spoke to my ancestors, I'm going to make the drop down to welterweight in Impa Kasanganay, who is moving down. You remember Impa Kasanganay, very bricked up. Where are you going to cut weight from that? Is cutting 15 pounds to go to welterweight. So it's almost like a breath of fresh air to see a fighter go, yeah, I'm good cutting this weight. And I don't know what the UFC is going to do with him. I know they're making him fight Drakkar Klose, which that could be real. That's a Jeremy Stevens rock'em sock'em fight that I like. But if he wins that fight, I could see him fight Dan Hooker or something crazy next. So while I'm happy for Jeremy Stevens to move back up to the division, I'm reticent to watch him succeed again at the division when he will have to face the deadly threats that are above him. Could you imagine Jeremy Stevens having to take on Tony Ferguson, or having to rematch Rafael dos Anjos? The mind boggles, but at least he's making that one smart decision for his health.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting. Jeremy Stevens hasn't fought at lightweight since he lost via ridiculous knockout to Eve Edwards.
Eve Edwards.
For that he dropped. Yeah, Eve Edwards. Yeah, and he dropped. Was it Pettis and Cerrone? I think before that. I remember I was at the Cerrone fight. That was in Virginia. That he lost that one. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do at lightweight, and definitely while getting punched in the head by bigger men is not healthy. Having more fluid in your brain while you're getting punched in the head by those bigger men just might be the ticket to preserving your career a bit longer. So kudos to Jeremy Stevens for that move. Now, fellas, it is time to move on to the speed bag, and this is where I get to flex my authority on you mofos. So let me go ahead, bring this clock up. I'm going to give you each 10 seconds to answer the following questions, and let's see. We'll start with Ben first. So, was ref Jerin Valel in the right taking a point away from Mayra Bueno Silva when she grabbed the fence to stop a takedown?
Yes, absolutely. I think that should happen the first time anybody clearly stops a takedown with a fence grab every fight.
And Jay?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really important thing. I wish more refs would be consistent. When a ref has to slap your hand away, take a point.
All right. Good calls there. Okay, second question. I'll start with you, Jay. If Valentina Shevchenko and Weili Zhang both win their next fights, is that the next logical fight to make?
I don't think logic has much to do with UFC matchmaking these days. So while it kind of makes sense if Zhang moves up, no, I'm expecting some nonsense.
Ben?
I'd actually like to see Zhang fight Andrade first. So no, we're not ready for the super fight yet.
All right. And there we go. Last question. I will start with you on this one, Ben. How many fights will UFC 259 have by Saturday night?
13, and one of them will not be the matchup that's currently listed.
Oh, bold prediction there. Jay, it's up to you now.
I have been hurt too much by these last several fight cards. I am very happy the last card had 9 fights. I'm going to go 12, and we're not going to be happy.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and change the clock over to 30 seconds. All right, and I will read all three. I will answer all 3 questions in succession, and the clock will begin after I finish reading the first question. Was ref Jerin Valel in the right, taking a point away from Mayra Bueno Silva for grabbing the fence to stop a takedown? Absolutely. He was 100% right. And as someone who has been a vocal critic of him in the past, in fact, I listed him as one of the 10 worst referees of all time on an MMA on point list. This was great work by him. We need to see this more often. Valentina Shevchenko versus Weili Zhang. Like, no, it's not the next logical fight. I'm tired of forcing the super fights. Let it go. Let them play out in their own divisions. And UFC 259 will have 11 fights by Saturday night with one all new matchup.
Woo.
Okay. Bonus question, not timed. So I picked the card to lose 3 matchups, basically. Jay picked it to lose 3. Ant picked it to lose 5. Like, not total fights, but 5 of the listed matchups. Is anyone confident that all 3 title fights will make it to the cage unscathed? Does someone in Adesanya's camp have COVID right now? And
no.
Adesanya is the one guy I'm completely secure about because he's in New Zealand and they are doing the right thing. Yeah. So Adesanya is fine. Man, Aljo just has gets cursed by the MMA gods / the UFC quite a lot. He would be the prime candidate to get screwed over this time. Nunes trains in Florida, so that's
American top team at that. I feel like Nunes is the one that would fall out.
That's like the COVID factory yes. in Florida. Man, you know what? I'm just amazed that Dominic Cruz has remained on this card. Now that's the guy. If there's ever going to be a backstage injury, that is the guy.
Luckily for him, even the coronavirus can't stand to be in the same room he's in. So like he's safe that way.
Yeah, man. It's it just feels like it. Like it's so difficult to get, but so excited. And I know this was, interestingly enough, we were going to have a more thorough discussion about this topic last week, and for time's sake, we just kind of dropped it. But man, like we can have this conversation every single week. Like, will these fights be on this card? And I don't know, man. I don't know. I do see a world where Dominic Cruz falls out at the last minute, like his last training session, he pulls his groin or something like that. Nunes at ATT, I could see, especially with her being a new mother and like a newborn baby in her house, they'll be extra careful about COVID stuff. That being said, if there is the hint of exposure, yeah, she's pulling out of that. Man, those are the two that I'm and Aljo, just because he has a string of bad luck at the top of the division as far as getting his just due. Those would be my top ones.
I don't want to wish this on anybody, but I need to ask this question because you might remember. Has Aljo gotten COVID yet? I think his girlfriend had it. I'd assume he would have had it.
I
thought it was in his orbit, but I don't remember if he had it because I mean, I don't want to kind of put this out there, but like you look at post-COVID matchups and you'd be like, well, he's already had it, so he's not like Thiago Santos. He's probably not pulling out of the fight because he already had it. And you go from there, but God, I don't want to wish any bad thoughts into the air like this, but when we go from 14 fights to 9 in the span of like 4 days or 5 days, it's just nothing is safe until the cage door closes behind both fighters.
Right. Just one fighter in the cage is not enough. Now we have precedent of that. And of course, because they're coming from New Zealand at City Kickboxing, like Kakar, France, Jake Matthews, they should be okay. Like as far as COVID is concerned, they should be fine. But yeah, man, it's a gamble. I'm curious as to what the lines are for the number of bouts on the card and which ones could fall out due to COVID or due to any other, unrelated injuries. So
I don't have any event wide props yet to see that one, but I'm curious. UFC 259 proceeds with X number of bouts. I know that that's happened before. That there have been, how many fights does this have on the card? Bets.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, and this is also, you know, from being brutalized the past several weeks, the UFC put 15 fights on this card for a reason.
Exactly. They expect something to fall off of this.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure to have 15 fights on the card and 3 of them are potential 25-minute fights.
Yeah.
That is a long potential night right there. That's a night that would not exist on the previous pay-per-view structure because you couldn't have a broadcast longer than a certain span of time.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't even chance that. And we remember what happened with I forget what event it was, but it was Tito Ortiz and I believe Vladimir Matyshenko in the main event, and that just got cut off.
33.
Yeah.
Yep, it was 33, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, this is definitely being booked with the idea that at least 3 of these fights are completely expendable.
Yeah.
At least 3 of them are completely expendable. And quite honestly, at least 1 title fight is too. When it comes down to the buy rate. Yeah, so I'm really thinking we're gonna have a different card come Saturday, and that's not being a pessimist. That's just looking at the last several months of I mean, really damn near a year now of what these cards look like in a post-COVID world. So there's that. Fellas, anything we want to discuss as far as potential like sleeper fights on this card?
There practically are none. This thing is ridiculously loaded. Like the first 3 fights up on the card all have like A to A+ level prospects on them.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that like Kai Kara France has been like demoted to like 3rd from the bottom and he's taking on Rogerio Bontorin. Like you've got Kai Kara France 21-9 versus 16-2 Rogerio Bontorin, 3rd up from the bottom. This card is ridiculously loaded. And I mean, we are all too willing to like shit on cards when they start out weak and they get weaker because they lose fights they couldn't afford to lose. You could take any one of the title fights from this card and any 4 other fights, non-title fights, and this would still be an A+ card, one of the best cards in a couple of years on paper. It's ridiculous how many good fights there are on this card.
I'm instead of looking at a fight, we're very excited about this fight card, which of course, as we just got through a discussion saying, well, you know, hang on, boys, we shouldn't be that excited about this card. I am very excited for this card to the point that I want to ask you guys a question, a throwback question, if you will. If the UFC decided, let's name cards again, let's stop doing Blachowicz versus Adesanya, let's stop doing whatever. What would you call this card? What would be the heading of to name UFC 259?
A borrow line from Trinidad James, all gold, everything.
Ooh, it's not bad. Duffy?
Well, I mean, stacked was already used.
Yeah.
So for a card that ironically was not that stacked.
Yeah.
UFC 259, almost too much of a good thing. I don't know what I'd even call this.
Sorry.
Like UFC 259, what the fuck are we going to do next week? There, that's what I'm calling this one.
UFC 259, we apologize in advance for the next 6 weeks.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is one of those cards that kind of pulls in from the rest of them. I'm looking at these 3 title fights and thinking, okay, each of them have the potential to be, well, not good if the certain matchup goes the way you think it will. The Blachowicz Adesanya could get stale and, you know, standoffish. Nunes could impose her wrestling because Megan Anderson has really long legs, and when she gets put in her back, unless she hits a triangle, she's stuck there forever. And Aljo Sterling can embrace the grind sometimes. So each of these fights can be not great, but each of these fights could be fantastic. Like, I can see Jan Blachowicz and Israel Adesanya beating the brakes off of each other with their, you know, just trading shots going wild. I can see Amanda Nunes saying, give me what you've got, and Megan Anderson kicks her in the face. I can see Petr Yan and Aljo Sterling going toe-to-toe. So I would call this event triple threat.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Let's just go ahead and jump right into the concluding segment for the show, and that's who you got. And this is going to be a fun one. Oh, it's going to be a fun one. So first up is the bantamweight title fight. Petr Yan, Aljamain Sterling. Ben, who you got?
Tentatively, you know, and this may change just within the next 2 days as I watch more tape, I've got Sterling. And I could be made to feel and look really dumb if Yan just boxes his face off in the first 8 minutes of the fight, because I expect Yan to have the advantage on the feet. He is a better boxer. He's a sharper boxer. Ethnic stereotypes be damned. He is the quicker and more explosive of the two guys. But I just have the feeling that that Sterling's going to survive that. This is going to end up on the ground. And Sterling is kind of poison for guys who wrestle like Yan. I think Sterling's going to find something and submit him in the third or fourth round.
Jay, who you got?
I also am taking what has turned into, by the way, a fight that Petr Yan was once not a huge favorite, but like I think it was like 140 or so, 140, 150, give or take. It is now a pick'em between Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan. I also am taking Aljamain Sterling, and not because I want to deride the division and say that it's weak and that the champion is not the best fighter in the division, even though I personally believe that the champion may not be the best fighter in the division right now. I see Aljamain Sterling, to be completely honest, he's done more. He's fought better opponents. He's gone through the ringer. He's had a bad loss. He's figured things out to a degree that Petr Yan has not. I mean, he's on what I think is a 7-fight UFC win streak, and his best win is over 2020 Jose Aldo, 2019 Uriah Faber, losing streak Jimmie Rivera. Like, Jimmie Rivera just lost again just the other day and had a good fight, but I just don't see in his body of work what he has done relative to the opposition that they'll be facing. What Aljamain Sterling did to Corey Sandhagen back in June was phenomenal. Was the kind of the takedown, the scramble, the boom, quick choke, lock, dead, it's over, was a thing of beauty. That's the kind of thing that I think Petr Yan will be surprised about. Petr Yan has one loss. We know about it. It was back in the Absolute Championship Berkut days to Bellator fighter Magomed Magomedov. I'm sure there's a couple of them out there who beat him using his wrestling. And I see Aljamain Sterling taking that path. I don't know if he'll get the finish like Duffy feels. If Aljo wins, I believe it would be by submission, but I'm going to go for a 5-round clinic. When Petr Yan runs into that opponent, he can't kick in the head and walk through and make him quit in the stool or anything like that. I think this is the moment where Petr Yan goes, this division is pretty good. I need to be careful here. So I'm going with Aljamain Sterling.
Let's just call it unanimous. I got Aljo winning this as well. And I see it going more the way Ben sees it going. Like I think Aljo gets a finish here. Yan is a good boxer, but I think Aljo, that was normally his weakest point, was his boxing. But man, he's closed that gap a lot his last few fights. When you see what he did to Pedro Munhoz, I think it really kind of started with the Jimmie Rivera fight, like his boxing just looking noticeably better. He's always been a fantastic kicker. I think he's always been able to blend his kicks with his wrestling in a very weird, like Phil Davis type style. I think that along with his boxing is a very, very difficult combination for someone like Yan, who isn't necessarily a standout in any one area. I think that Aljo's go-tos, I think his hands are gonna be sharp enough to stay up with him on the feet, mixing in the kicks as well. If he gets this fight to the floor, I think he goes through Yan like a buzzsaw, and I think he gets the tap. I'm gonna give it third round submission for Aljamain Sterling. There's a reason why Sherdog and I believe at least one other independent media ranking have Aljo ranked higher than the champion. There is a reason why, and we're going to see that reason Saturday. So let's move on now to the women's featherweight title between Amanda Nunes and the only other women's featherweight on the roster, Megan Anderson. Fellas, I'll start with you on this one, Jay. Who you got?
Well, I'm pretty sure we all know how all three of us are going to pick in this one. Amanda Nunes is about a minus 1,200 favorite, and rightfully so. As we noticed in her fight against Germaine Durand, she can wrestle, impose her top game, and do the damn thing on the floor if she has to. And we also know that Megan Anderson was taken down repeatedly by one Holly Holm. So I think the only point of interest I will point out is I believe Megan Anderson will have a moment in the fight where she may almost finish the fight. I believe it will probably come on the ground, on her back, throwing her long legs up to set up some sort of a triangle choke. I think Amanda Nunes may get a little too ambitious, a little too reckless, a little too carefree to be like, I can do whatever I want here, and fall into a triangle. Now, I don't think it'll be secured. I don't think she'll get the tap, but I think it'll be that moment where we go, oh, maybe Amanda Nunes is vulnerable here. And then she proceeds to pound and smash and drop elbows until things are really, really bad. I'm going to say I believe that Amanda Nunes will get a finish on the ground. I believe she will I think she'll actually hand Megan Anderson her first stoppage loss due to strikes. But I think it'll be by ground and pound, by elbows, by just a tiring, relentless beating on the ground until things are kind of a drag for Megan Anderson's face. It won't get as bad as a Felicia Spencer fight. I think probably around 3 or 4 is about that point where Megan Anderson will run out of a defensive ability and get pounded out. So yeah, I'm going with Amanda Nunes with a finish, which I think, let's see, right as of Monday night, Amanda Nunes winning the fight inside the distance is a minus 340, which is a higher favorite than any other fighter on the card. So,
wow.
Well, that is brutal. Ben, Nunes and Anderson, who you got?
As far back as I can remember, I have wanted Megan Anderson to turn into a great fighter. As far back as at least her Invicta debut, which is, I think, almost 6 years ago at this point, I saw her and I was like, she just needs to become the fighter that she's on her way to being. I was looking at her as someone who might one day challenge Chris Cyborg. Like, at the very least, this is a woman who is absolutely like a for real 145 pounder, like a physical specimen, someone who won't be just bullied and punted out of the cage by Cyborg, who at that point was subsisting on a diet of blown up bantamweights. It's never happened. To this day, Megan Anderson has one top 10 victory, and it was the weird eye scratch by the toe over Kat Zingano in a fight that I'm not sure I favored her in otherwise. I think I favored her to win, but that's it. That's her best win. It's not just that she's a huge underdog, it's that I can't picture any plausible avenue to victory for her here other than like, well, a weird freak injury thing like that, or a 1 in a million submission. I'm not going to pick for that to happen to Amanda Nunes. Nunes is hitting the end of her prime, the end of her lifespan, but that's going to come faster at bantamweight than at featherweight. At featherweight, she is still as dangerous as she's ever been, and I just expect her to be better than Anderson everywhere. I don't have the faith Jay does, so I might look at the prop bet for like inside of 2.5 rounds, because I think Nunes is going to get the better of the striking really quick on the feet. And depending on how compromised Anderson is the first time it hits the ground, this could be over in the first round. Nunes is a fast starter. Well, she's always been a fast starter, and she remains a fast starter at featherweight, where I think she's not as concerned about her gas take. And she's fighting fighters that are not as defensively sound. I predict a steamrolling. It's not a brave pick, but I can't talk myself into anything else.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. Then this is going to be a one-way beatdown. I think Nunes has. We don't even have to talk about her tremendous power that she possesses in her hands and feet. To sit here, I've been cage side for 2 of her biggest wins. I was cage side for the Cyborg win, and I was cage side for the Holly Holm victory as well. To be just feet away from punches and kicks to the head landing from her, it is a frightening experience. I've also been cage side for Megan Anderson with the power she has when she defeated Charmaine Tweet. And she is fantastically gifted as a striker, great power. However, she takes a lot of punishment while she's dishing out her own. And despite her limbs being longer than everyone else, essentially in her weight class, she gets touched quite often. People find their way on the inside and they touch her up. You can't get touched up if you're Megan Anderson and the person across from you is Amanda Nunes. It just doesn't work that way. You can't give away any shots. And I think Anderson's instinct is to just give away shots, hoping to land her own. I think what's going to happen, Nunes is going to jump out to a ridiculously fast start, crack her very early on, like within the first 2 minutes. If it doesn't end right there, a wobbled Anderson will find herself even more compromised than she otherwise would have been on the floor, and Nunes just has her way with her. I don't see a path to victory for Anderson outside of the miraculous, and as much potential as we've seen in her, it's just unfortunate that she's facing the greatest female fighter. And if you made the argument that Amanda Nunes is the greatest fighter, period, of all time, I'm not going to be that mad at you. So this is just wrong time for Megan Anderson. And quite frankly, this is going to be a savage display. And man, it's gonna get ugly. So Nunes within the first 2 rounds is my pick. All right, fellas. Now the main event, the super fight between Jan Blachowicz and Israel Adesanya, light heavyweight gold at stake. Ben, who you got?
I do have Adesanya in this one, and I've gone back and forth a lot on this one. When it was first announced, I mean, they first started talking about it like 6 months ago. My first thought was, you know what? Jan Blachowicz is going to jump up and shock the world again. Like, it's ridiculous. I think I laid it out when he beat Reyes, because I said this guy has been the betting underdog in like 9 of his last 10 fights, and just has defied the odds over and over and over again. And my first thought was, you know what? He's going to be too big, too strong for Adesanya. I can't get with that anymore. I think the difference in speed on the feet is going to be shocking. And on top of that, Adesanya will be the taller man with the longer reach. It may not be a thriller of a fight. Blachowicz is not the kind of guy that's I think is going to feed Adesanya his next highlight for the reel. If Blachowicz really wants to fight to his best advantage, he could revert to KSW Jan, who really just wanted to bring things to the ground and grapple. I mean, he's been knocking people out at the in his most recent UFC run, but he came up as just like a powerhouse top position grappler. If he went for that, I mean, he's always got the outside chance he could exploit Adesanya on the ground. But yeah, give me Adesanya. I think he wins probably by decision, probably fairly lopsided, and probably not super exciting. Like, he probably takes like 4 rounds, maybe even 5, but there's not even a moment where anybody thinks Blachowicz is close to being finished.
Jay, main event, Izzy and Jan, who you got?
Man, I feel like I shouldn't pick against Blachowicz at this point. Like, given his body of work and that his only loss in the last several years has been to brick-fisted Thiago Santos in a fight that I believe he just simply ran out of steam and didn't want to get hit in the face anymore. But who can blame him? He's fighting a guy named The Hammer, who has the song, a walkout song, that is something like the hammer of God that changes the world. Like, that's his walkout music is Thiago Santos. So I don't want to excuse that performance, but I get it. He wanted to stand toe-to-toe with Thiago Santos. Now, Blachowicz, what I think his kryptonite right now will be the fact that he is 38 years old. It is a forgotten thing that Jan Blachowicz had a long and a very successful career in the Polish promotion KSW, becoming its champion, fighting for it, I believe, almost the most times. I think the only other fighters that fought more were Mamed Khalidov and Michel Materla. So this is a KSW guy who finally figured out, I can go up here, and won the title in the most unusual of unexpected ways. when Jon Jones was out of the picture. I want to believe in him. And I think there's a danger that he poses that is unusual that most of Adesanya's opponents haven't presented in the reach. Adesanya only has 2-inch reach advantage over his opponent, which is way different than like Paulo Costa, who had like 7 inches, and other fighters like that. I think that Blachowicz is going to keep him honest, but I am all online with what Duffy had to say, that the speed is going to kill. And I think the speed is going to make everybody go, okay, Adesanya, we already knew he was a generational talent by what he did to Paulo Costa, by what he did to Robert Whittaker, by that wild performance of Kelvin Gastelum. I think this is another one of those moments. And I think the harder question after this all ends is going to be, what's he going to do next? Is he going to fight Jon Jones, with Jon Jones fully committing to heavyweight and looking to full 250 right now? I don't think Izzy's going to chase him up to 250. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens after 259. But I think the speed and the accuracy of Adesanya will be the major difference maker, and he'll get the finish probably in like the 3rd round or so.
You know, it's we've talked so many times about doubting Jan Blachowicz. We've talked about this so many times, and here I am doing it again. Here I am looking at this man who is a powerhouse, who I have seen with my own eyes knock someone's block off and be doubted all the way up until the moment that said person went unconscious. I got to do it again, man. Israel Adesanya is a next generation level talent. Like this is a guy who, in my opinion, will go down as one of the all-time greats. And he has put on these masterful performances. And I think Jan is tailor-made for another one of these masterful performances. I don't think it's going to be as lopsided as it was against Paulo Costa. I think that is another realm of just one-way traffic. But we're going to have them in the same conversation, I believe. As Jay alluded to, the speed and the accuracy, I see Israel being able to maintain distance to suit his needs, landing leg kicks at will, able to shuck off the takedowns, land punches when he wants, slip and counter, and put on an artful display. Even though Jan has a lot of power and he's definitely the bigger man, this isn't Izzy's first outing against bigger men. This is a man who competed at heavyweight in kickboxing, and has had much better strikers, much harder hitters in front of him, and he was able to do away with them. I think we're going to see Adesanya put on a show here, and I think the difference between what happened with Yoel Romero, who I think he quickly realized he could outclass, is that he'll do more so like he did with Paulo Costa, and that's actually push for the finish. So I see him picking apart Blachowicz for the better part of 2.5, 3 rounds, and a compromise Blachowicz will likely be in a defensive shell and just get pot shotted from there on out. Whether or not he stays up to make it to the decision is going to be a matter of his toughness. But Israel Adesanya is going to do everything he can to end this within the distance. So I'll go late stoppage for Izzy on that one. All right, fellas. So we were about to wrap things up, but we just had some news break. Like I just looked on Twitter and see it appears that Khamzat Chimaev has now retired due to lingering effects of COVID-19. So, man, they like literally just broke this like a couple minutes ago via I forget whose Twitter account broke this news. But so let's just give our quick reactions on Khamzat Chimaev, the shortest, most hyped career probably in UFC history.
Here, I'll before we dive too deep, I'll read. This is by Google Translation, and we're having one of our Russian-speaking staff members translate to make sure there's not a word or two lost in translation. That it's a very important word. So this is from Chimaev's own Instagram page. It says, "I want to say thank you to everyone for their support in my path in this sport. I think I'm done. Yes. I know that I didn't take the belt, but this is not the most important victory in this life. Maybe it will upset you, but my heart and body tell me everything. I want to say a huge thank you to my team, All Stars Jim Sweden. I want to say thank you so much, UFC. Alhamdulillah. So that, I mean, COVID is no joke. I mean, that's the very first takeaway that I personally have from this. We knew that he had what was that? I believe they call it, was it post-COVID? Essentially the lingering
like
symptoms.
A long hauler, I think
Yes,
is
yes.
the term. Yeah.
This is a fighter who was supposed to fight at the end of last year. He was going to fight Leon Edwards, got COVID, was hoping to recover by January, didn't recover, was hoping to fight in March or February, and he had to pull out because he's in trouble, and said that he was going to be maybe back by summertime if everything goes according to plan. I wouldn't be surprised if this really is it, because, you know, if you can't come back full strength and you've been dealing with an illness so long, that could be it. But maybe at the same time, you know, it's just kind of a frustration at the moment of, oh my God, I can't get a fight. I can't seem to take a good breath. I don't know. I want to turn it over to you guys for more thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, I've gone through the 5 stages of grieving just in the past 8 minutes since we got this news. My first thought before I read the actual post and knew that it was COVID related was, oh, okay, it's either like a tantrum or a negotiation tactic, because, you know, a big name, high level fighter saying I retire on social media without any other preamble is usually, oh, I don't like the deal, you know, my promoter's offering me, or something like that. Once I read the actual post, it is heartbreaking. Even among us who've been kind of like, what the hell about the incredible just hype rocket that he's ridden for the past most of a year, saw that he was a legit prospect. I mean, I think all 3 of us here were of the opinion, okay, this guy is future title challenger material, even if we think right now is a little bit premature. Even if we thought Edwards was a step too far, all of us were like, it's just a matter of time before this guy gets there. So that's heartbreaking. And of course it is for him more, you know, than any of us. This is his life, his livelihood that is changing. Maybe he'll change his mind if his body tells him something different. He led off by saying, I've got to do what my body tells me. But anyone watching this has probably heard me mention before that my wife is a nurse who's worked at a hospital exclusively with COVID patients for over a year now. And so, you know, she just has seen the worst that this virus can do for a full year. And all of the people, you know, and pardon me as I get on my soapbox, but all of the people who have said there's a 99% survival rate, you know, you're making a big deal out of this. I'm like, 99% survive, but what is their quality of life after they survive? Like, after they are stuck in a hospital for a month and a half without their family being able to visit them, what is their quality of life when they get out? Permanent fibrotic lung scarring is shockingly common. And if that happens to someone like me, and I'm in my 40s and I type in a chair for a living, maybe it's not even noticeable. If I'm a top level athlete and my lung capacity is integral to what I do, it's a life changer. It would be like me losing both of my hands. You know, it makes me angry at the people who continue to minimize the impact of the pandemic. But I mean, that's about me, or at least about my feelings as it is. I am just heartbroken for Chimaev and his UFC career and what might have been.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to state it. I mean, such a promising career, such a, you know, a promising guy in multiple avenues, like someone who obviously had the grappling chops, clearly judging by his last win, that spectacular knockout over Jared Mershart, had the power in his hands and also captured the fans' imagination. And on top of that, had the backing of the promotion. You know, we've seen a lot of fighters have some of these elements, but it's very rare that we see a fighter have all of them, and looks like that they can capitalize on that, and to have COVID kind of wipe that away is really tragic. But I'm also thinking that maybe this is a temporary thing, because we know that throughout this entire time, Chimaev has still been trying to train. He's still been accepting bookings and whatnot. He's still been trying to act as if everything was normal. And we saw from that video that I believe his management put out with him like struggling to breathe in between rounds and sparring and stuff like that. He was, you know, that maybe the stress of that has made this worse, has made his symptoms worse, and he simply needs to stop training martial arts, period, for however long it takes for his body to simply recover. If you saw the Joe Rogan experience that featured Cody Garbrandt, and he talked about how when he had COVID, what did him under was still trying to train, was still pushing himself in the gym, and his body not having the time to giving himself a proper immune response. So maybe, you know, end of the year, Chimaev will say, hey, I'm back in the gym, I'm feeling better, let me gain a few more pounds back and let me rebuild some muscle, and I'm right back in there. Unfortunately, though, that means that we'll always have a what if around him. If he goes out there and he underperforms the lofty expectations we all have for him, man, how many people are going to say, man, COVID really changed him forever? And maybe it's true. Maybe it is true. But either way, there's always going to be that gray cloud over his career if he chooses to pick up one later. So it's just sad on overall, just overall right here. So, man,
No.
Yeah, Jay, go ahead.
You know, 2 days ago, Chimaev posted on his Instagram page, thanking the Dana White and the UFC. If we remember correctly, the UFC flew Chimaev out to the States in Las Vegas to get some better medical treatment for it. And he said, thank you. Want to say thank you to Dana White and the UFC, give me medical treatment and taking care of me first class. Thank you. I'm very grateful. See you in June. So, I mean, a lot can happen in 2 days. I think I'm in line with what you're thinking, Ant, that he needs to take some time and, you know, breathe for a minute before
like literally breathe for a minute.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
That was no pun intended, by the way, audience. Yeah, I think I wish the best for him. You know, I hope he recovers fully, first and foremost, before even thinking about fighting. Go day to day, and then we can talk. I mean, he's still just a kid. He's got plenty of time if he recovers fully first.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's unfortunate. So let this be a lesson to everyone out there. Like, this is very real. There's a reason why we have been living in some state of lockdown for the better part of a year, and why there are, when the US alone, over 500,000 people have died. This is very serious. And just because you say survival rates or this and that, don't be an idiot. There's a huge spectrum in surviving. So wear a mask, be careful, just follow instructions, and maybe we'll see the other side of this. So yeah. So any parting thoughts before we wrap things up, gentlemen?
Just a couple minutes ago, Chimaev posted one of those live stories, and he posted some writing that was translated on Reddit, where it was a sink that was covered in blood. Presumably the conventional wisdom is that he spat or coughed into it. And he said, take yourself and your family. This is the most important thing. The main thing is, I do not know what this disease is, but it is not easily outlived.
Yeah. So the last thing that should be on his mind is fighting. And the last thing that should be on the minds of fans is, man, he needs to get in there and fight. So this is another harsh reminder that fighters are people too. So that'll do it. I think Adonis has decided we are done for this edition of Unleashed. Big thanks to Ben and Jay, as always, holding down the panel. Looking forward to doing it all again next week, post UFC 259. So remember to like, subscribe, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. You can check out Ben and Jay's work on SureDog.com. You can find me on the Body Lock and MMA on Point. Also did some fight prediction videos for Fightful as well. So go ahead and check those out. Shaq's been posting those to social media lately. Stay beautiful, stay positive, stay safe from COVID, and stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.